All right. So now while I do the introduction to the speaker, and while the speaker is speaking, you can keep your cameras on. You can keep your cameras off. No worries. Later on, when you have any questions, I will ask all of you, whoever has a question, please switch on your mic, please switch on your camera, ask your question so that it's easier for the speaker to look at you and then give you an answer. Okay, okay. Can you all hear me properly? Give me a thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, let's share screen now. Okay, is my screen visible to all?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So I would like to introduce you to our speaker for today, our guest speaker. This is Mr. Kunal Kaul. He's a certified specialist of wine. He is from India. He is the founder of a company called Grape Expectations. A very good friend of mine. So I'll tell you what we are going to do today, and I'll also introduce him. So today our speaker is going to talk to you a little bit about sparkling wines, aromatized wines, fortified wines. You know these already because you should have. We discussed this in the last week before the Hari Raya holidays. If you did not, no worries. Mr. Kunal will repeat many things which I talked to you, and after this week, after next week is your learning week, self-learning week. So the week after that, in the practical classes, Monday to Friday, all the groups, we will be tasting all these wines. We will be doing our sensorials. So there will be another learning happening in that week. Not next week, huh? Just reminding you, next week is Independent Learning Week, week 8. The attendance is happening at the moment. It's in the group chat, so please do it before it closes. I'll do the introduction to the speaker now, and then the speaker will talk to you for maybe around 40-45 minutes, after which we'll have a quick question answer session. If you have any questions in between, please do not wait till the end of the session. You may forget. Just put your question in the group chat. Write down in the group chat. Later on, the speaker will be able to read your questions and give you the answers. And then we'll have a quick closing session, maybe a group photo, and then we'll finish for today. All right, so let's go ahead. I'll tell you a little bit about Mr. Kunal. He is a hospitality professional for nearly 18 years, and he's worked in the industry as well as in hospitality education. So he has been an F&B lecturer, just like me. He's also been a beverage lecturer, teaching students doing hospitality courses. He's worked in 5-star hotels. He's worked in Hilton, Accor, Radisson, and Thistle hotels. Kunal, if you remember, I'm also a Thistle hotel staff earlier. So we share our hotel background as well. Then he had stints in France and United Kingdom. He managed to get lots of hands-on experience in the wine and spirit area. At the moment, he's a wine and spirit trainer. He's traveled a lot around the world for wines and spirits, and he has a lot of qualifications throughout. He's gathered a lot of qualifications, especially when it comes to alcohols and beverages. He's a certified sake sommelier with the Sake Sommelier Association. He's a certified specialist of wine and spirits from WSET UK. He's a certified specialist of wine from Society of Wine Educators. He's a sherry educator from Consorcio Regulator de la Jerez or Jerez from Spain. Again, I have Kunal. I also have some Spanish students here. So if we make any, whenever I make any Spanish pronunciation mistakes, my Spanish students always help me. So that's Mr. Kunal. He's here. With this, I will give the presentation to Mr. Kunal, and then he can start talking to you and sharing his session to you. Kunal, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mayuk. It's a pleasure interacting with your students and seeing you after a number of months. So good to see you, buddy. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to giving this lecture at the Taylor's University and having such wonderful introduction, along with my photo wherein I had a little bit of hair. Now I don't so much. What we're going to do is as Mr. Mayuk said, you already know a little bit about me. I'm not going to take a little more time on introducing myself. We'll dive straight into what we're supposed to do today. We'll talk about a little bit about sparkling wines. We'll talk about aromatized wines. We'll talk about fortified wines. So give me a minute. Let me just quickly share my screen and I will be starting. 1 second. All right, so here we go. So an introduction to sparkling wines, fortified wines, and aromatized wines. These are all three of them are, you can say, styles of wines. Okay, there's another still wine, which we're not going to talk about today. We'll talk about sparkling, fortified. These are sort of lesser branched out varieties, styles of wines apart from still. So first of all, we'll start by sparkling. We'll move on to the fortified one, and then in the end we will spend a little bit time about on aromatized wine. If you have any questions, as Mr. Mayuk said, do put it in group chat, and I will be happy to answer them once we're over with this presentation. Right. So the first and foremost, of course, is sparkling wine. All right. So what does sparkling wine mean? In a nutshell, in a gist, sparkling wine means a wine which has trapped and dissolved CO2, that's carbon dioxide. All right. Now, there are many types of sparkling wines in the world. Most of you might only recognize or think about sparkling wine as champagne, but that's not the case. There are a lot of sparkling wines around the world. And I have listed out certain sparkling wines that are famous around the world. All right. There are more than this. They're not restricted to only 3, 4, which are on your screen. There are many more than this, right? So wines which have trapped carbon dioxide. So in an essence, in a nutshell, you make your still wine and then you find various ways of trapping carbon dioxide in it. We'll discuss what various types are there, what various methods are there to actually trap this carbon dioxide in the next slide as you move ahead. But before that, I want to bring your attention to some styles of sparkling wines which you should know. One, of course, the first and the foremost, champagne. Pretty much everybody knows about this. World-renowned, quite heavy on the wallet as well. So a very well-known sparkling wine here. All right. The second one that I mentioned is cava. For the Spanish friends here, cava is a sparkling wine that comes from Spain. Champagne comes from the Champagne region of France. Cava can actually, by law, be made anywhere in Spain, but most of the cava comes from Penedès region, which is the northeast part of Spain. Then near Barcelona, actually, just around Barcelona, right? So the third one is called the Prosecco, which is probably the most well-known of sparkling wines that you would find around the world. That comes from Italy. And the last one that I have mentioned here, which a lot of people might not be aware of or doesn't probably resonate as much with sparkling wine, is called Franciacorta, which is an Italian style sparkling wine, right? So all 4 of them, plus, as I mentioned, there will be more, and there are quite more sparkling wines, which around the world, in India, in Australia, New Zealand, from the US, California, a lot of sparkling wines come from all parts of South Africa. But of course, we cannot cover all of them. Yeah. So I mentioned these 4. Of course, these 4 have various ways of being methods of being made, and in the next slide we will discuss that itself, right? So sparkling wines can be very, very inexpensive bulk value wines, all right? Sparkling wines can be mid-priced wines. Sparkling wines can be premium to super premium expensive wines as well, depending on what is the method of making it, where does it come from, right? And what is the various aspects that surround the method of production, growing of grapes, aging, etc., etc. So many, 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 many aspects attached to it. For example, champagne generally sits in premium to super premium range, all right, price wise, generally. Okay. Prosecco can be inexpensive bulk, medium priced, or some Proseccos are such sort of premium category as well. So that is the Prosecco range. Franciacorta, Cava can be different different cadres. So that's a little bit about what sparkling wine is. Basically, you take your still wines, find different ways of trapping and dissolving carbon dioxide, and here we go. We have a sparkling wine, although it's not as easy as it sounds, but we'll discuss it in the next slide. The reason that I've mentioned this slide is you might be thinking, what's the point of having the fermentation being explained to us? But there is a point here. The point is, what do we need to make a bottle of still wine a sparkling wine? All right. What do we need? We need carbon dioxide. And where do we get this carbon dioxide? We get this carbon dioxide in most of the sparkling wines through fermentation. All right. Remember the fermentation that is used to make your wine, your still wine? That's the first fermentation, all right, which is used to make still wine. Most of the times when you're making a sparkling wine, a decent sparkling wine, you actually undergo a second fermentation, all right? That second fermentation can be done in bottle, that second fermentation can be done in tank, etc., etc. So sugar plus yeast eats up sugar, gives you alcohol, but the most important thing which we as human beings and winemakers and wine enthusiasts and students ignore completely is this gentleman here, carbon dioxide. And this is the essence of making your sparkling wine. Without carbon dioxide, you cannot make your sparkling wine, all right? So, but what happens is that during the first fermentation, we let this carbon dioxide escape. We don't need it because we're making a wine which is still. We don't need it. So why keep it? So during the fermentation, when fermentation happening, the tank, you've got a tank, and you see these bubbles coming out. That's what carbon dioxide, and you let it escape. So we don't need that. But for second fermentation, but for making a sparkling wine, you need the carbon dioxide. So what and how this carbon dioxide is used in making a wine, a sparkling wine, let's see how that works. So production process, right? I call this the lazy way of making a sparkling wine. There are different styles, different types of sparkling wines that are around the world, which are made by injection method, basically injecting carbon dioxide. In an essence, you take a bottle of still wine and you inject carbon dioxide in that, and you make sure that this carbon dioxide sort of absorbs and tries and dissolve it in the wine. And that's pretty much it. And that's how you make sparkling wine, through this method. But because of the fact that this is a slow method, this is a very knee-jerk kind of a method. It's a very fast method. The bubbles of carbon dioxide do not actually get dissolved in the wine. And as soon as you open the bottle of sparkling wine, you pour a glass, the bubbles go escape. All right. Thus, you generally don't find good sparkling wines that are made through injection method, because this is not actually I won't say it's not the right method. It's a lazy method. It's a slow method, and you don't actually get a good quality injection method sparkling wines. But yes, this method exists. It is used in some sparkling wines around the world. but more often than not, you will not find a good premium, good quality sparkling wine being made from this method. All right. The second method is called the tank method. It's also known as Chardonnay method. Okay, and this involves second fermentation. So basically, what you do is you take a tank, all right, a big stainless steel tank, and you put your still wine in there, all right, and you put some sugar, you put some yeast. Guess what happens? Second fermentation, all right. You've got a wine, you put some sugar, you put some yeast. The yeast starts acting. The yeast starts eating up the sugar. It gives you a little bit of alcohol, about 0.5% or 1% increase, all right? But what more importantly it gives you is the carbon dioxide. That is a byproduct of fermentation. But in this case, we do not let the carbon dioxide escape. We trap it in the tank itself, all right? We do not let it escape. So these are big tanks with lids and pressurized containers, okay? So as the second fermentation happens, the carbon dioxide goes up, but it cannot escape. All right. So it's forced down to mingle and dissolve in the wine itself. And then this wine is bottled under pressure. The screw cap is put on, it's corked, it's sent out in the market. All right. Again, this is a faster method compared to the method that we're going to come in the end. It's a faster method, but there are many good quality, mid-priced to even premium wines that are made this way. This is a faster method. This is a quicker method. And if you have the right equipment like tanks and computer generated equipment, which are automatic, this becomes very, very, very fast. Prosecco is made in this way. All right. And just to give you a little trivia about Prosecco is that the demand of Prosecco a few years ago became so much that Prosecco DOC, which is the regulatory body of Prosecco, had to increase the area, the geographical area, to plant more wines, to get more grapes. All right. So because of that, it's actually unheard of in the wine world is that the geography of where Prosecco could be made, where the grapes could be grown, had to be extended because the increased demand that Prosecco had. And because of that, the reason being that Prosecco can be made very quickly. It can be made, you take the grapes, you make a still wine, you put it in the tank, you do the fermentation, it can be produced a lot quicker than other methods, all right? And you get a good product. So a bottle of Prosecco is not going to be like the injection method. You open it, you pour a glass, you will have good quality bubbles, right? All right. So again, not very low in category, but not very low in quality, but not very high in quality either. So tank method is somewhere in the between. The last one is traditional method, which we also in French call méthode traditionnelle, excuse my French, méthode traditionnelle, which is also known as bottled fermentation. All right, this is a more laborious, more traditional, more difficult method, but the quality that the sparkling wine, quality that this method produces, the sparkling wine that this method produces is probably one of the best that there is in the market. All right, champagne is made this way, cava is made this way, Franciacorta is made this way, and other traditional other sparkling wines as well. But it is a little more difficult as far as handling, managing, supervising the entire process is concerned. So basically, the same method that you were doing in a tank, you have to do it in every individual bottle. All right. So it makes it even more difficult because you have to take care and you have to find a way of supervising millions of bottles of wine that are undergoing second fermentation. So basically, you take a bottle of still wine. Let's for example take champagne. You take a bottle of still wine and you put some sugar, put some yeast, and you screw cap it. All right, you seal it. Now, what's going to happen over the next few days is that yeast and sugar are going to start reacting. The yeast is going to start eating the sugar. There will be a little bit of alcohol that will be made, but more importantly, you get carbon dioxide. right? And because the bottle is trapped and it's a very small place, unlike a tank, it's a very small place, the bubbles cannot escape. So the bubbles don't have a choice other than actually really mixing inside the liquid. So what happens is, over a period of time, these bubbles get soluble and dissolved in the wine so much that they become very, very small, right? For a sparkling wine, always remember, the smaller the bubbles are, the better the sparkling wine is. Always, all right? The bigger bubbles escape quicker. The smaller bubbles dissolve and they don't escape too quickly. So that's what it does. But you have many bottles. You just don't have one bottle. So in a tank, it's easy to supervise, it's efficient, it's quicker. But in bottles, you probably have 1 million bottles fermenting at the same time, all right? Fermentation happening at the same time. Now, that is one. But most of the time, bottle fermentation, sparkling wines that are made from bottle fermentation, they are also mandatory by law, have aging requirements, all right? Like champagne has an aging requirement of 15 months, all right? I'm not going to go into how much in lees and all of that. That's slightly more complicated, but champagne has a aging requirement of at least 15 months. That means for 15 months, the bottle is sitting in your cellar, all right? And only after 15 months by law are you supposed to release it in the market. Most champagne houses go way beyond 15 months, go to 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Vintage champagne go up to 7 years, 8 years. So many of them go way beyond 15 months. That way you have these bubbles that really integrate within the liquid, within the wine, and thus you find you come to a conclusion, you come to a product wherein the bubbles really tiny compared to what you would have gotten into tank method or an injection method. All right. So that's why traditional method sparkling wines are so expensive, not so expensive, like more expensive than the others, and are it take longer time to be made, or take a lot more effort to be made. All right. So there are 3 ways. There are other ways as well, but I'm not going to go into that of making sparkling wine. So the couple of pictures here that I'm showing you this is a way of making a tank. This is how, you've got massive tanks. You put your wines in there. You start your secondary fermentation. These are temperature controlled pressure containers, tanks, wherein you can trap the carbon dioxide. All right, and you bottle the wine under pressure and you send it out. That's Prosecco. But this is more laborious. All right, this is probably from champagne, of course. You've got a lot of bottles, secondary fermentation happening in all these bottles across the cellars. Very huge, massive cellars. But of course, you can see controlling and supervising and monitoring 1 million bottles is much more difficult than monitoring 6 or 7 tanks. So there's a lot more effort that goes in traditional method sparkling wines. Thus, they are more expensive, and quality-wise, they are much better. Right. So injecting CO2, as I said, inexpensive, bulk production, lower quality of your sparkling wine. Tank method, Chardonnay, secondary fermentation. It have in tank method, mid-priced and mid to good quality. That's example is Prosecco. There are other tank method wines, sparkling wines as well. And the last is traditional method, bottle fermentation. Again, secondary fermentation happens premium to super premium quality wines because of the effort, the time, the labor, and the quality of the final product that you get. Champagne, Cava, Franciacorta are made this way. Franciacorta has a longer minimum aging than champagne, right? Just a trivia for you. Cool. So these are the 3 ways. There are other ways as well, but they are slightly complicated, so I will not touch upon that right now. But a couple of terms that you should know regarding sparkling wines is these 2 right here. All right, Blanc de Blanc and Blanc de Noir. Okay, so Blanc de Blanc. Blanc in French means white, right? And Noir in French means black. Pinot Noir, black. All right. So Blanc de Blanc, you might find some of these terms on bottle of champagne or bottle of sparkling wine. So what do they mean? When it says Blanc de Blanc, means white of white literally, which means that the bottle of sparkling wine that you're holding in your hand has been made 100% entirely by white grapes only. All right. Blanc de Noir means what? Means white of black, literal translation. But what does it mean? When it says Blanc de Noir on a bottle of sparkling wine that you're holding, it means that the sparkling wine that you're holding in your hand has been made from black grapes, all right? Not white grapes. You will generally find this on your sparkling wine labels or champagne. Of course, this comes from champagne, but now it's being used and for other sparkling wines as well. So you might find that on the label of sparkling wines. So you should know what that means. Blanc de Blanc, white wine, sparkling wine made from white grapes only, and Blanc de Noir, sparkling wine made from black grapes. All right. Serving temperature of a sparkling wine should always be well chilled, 6 to 10 degrees. Some people only mug up the sparkling wines, but don't actually look beyond the reason of serving certain wines at certain temperatures. One of the reasons why sparkling wines should be served at 6 to 10 or well chilled is because of two reasons. One, any sparkling wine, most of the sparkling wines are high in acidity. Okay, they're high acidity wines, and any high acidity wine should be served very chilled. If you serve anything or any beverage which is high in acidity and you serving it at room temperature or slightly warmer, that acidity is going to rip up your palate. All right, number one. Number two, more importantly than acidity, is because sparkling wine has bubbles, has carbon dioxide, and bubbles are best served chilled. Again, you serve bubbles at a higher temperature, they will escape like that. All right. So you want to maintain and retain that bubbles for as long as possible. So you get that bubbles in your mouth because that's the hallmark of a sparkling wine. All right. So that's the two reasons that we generally serve them well chilled. Always serve sparkling wines well chilled. And you will notice, if you want to do this exercise, you will notice if you serve your sparkling wine slightly warmer or at room temperature, you will realize that your bubbles will escape very quickly. All right. And what you'll be left with in your glass would be basically just white wine, not sparkling wine. Cool. Some of the brands, very famous brands. I mean, there are many brands as far as champagnes are concerned. I've only put champagne here for now. Is Moët de Chandon, of course, Mums, Krug, Pommery, Lanson, Henroy, you name it. They've all, so there are many different brands of these sparkling wines, of course, for Prosecco as well, and for Franciacorta as well, and for Cava as well. These are the common brands that you will generally see around the world for sparkling wine. So that's your sparkling wine in a nutshell. Injecting CO2, tank method, you need secondary fermentation for that. Traditional method, bottle fermentation, you need secondary fermentation for that. And then a few terminologies and serving temperature for this. All right. So that was in a nutshell your sparkling wines. And you've got some labels here as well, just in case you want to have a look. This is a Prosecco, this is a Krug, that's one of the very good champagnes. This is probably a Cava right here. So although they look similar, ladies and gentlemen, there's a considerable difference of quality inside the bottle itself, all right? Right, next we move to fortified wines, right? Now, what do you actually mean by fortified wines, all right? The term or terminology of fortify means in English something. What does it mean in English? It means to make it stronger, all right? Whenever, if you watch any military stuff and all, you will see people talking about fortifying your defenses, okay, making your defenses stronger. Okay, that is the same concept that this in fortified wines that means. But basically making your wine stronger. And how do you do that? Wines which have additional alcohol added to them are called fortified wines. All right, we will talk about why it is done or why it was done in a minute. But before that, I want to share with you some kinds or types of fortified wines. So wines which have additional alcohol added to them, they generally range between 15 to 22% ABV. All right. You are aware that still wines are under 15. Generally, all still wines are under 15% ABV, ranging from 11.5 to 14.5, max to max 15. But fortified wines, because you've got additional alcohol that you added into it, you can go up to 22%. All right. Types of fortified wines. Sherry comes from Spain. Jerez, precisely down south of Spain. I'm very passionate about sherry, as my youth would know. Sherry comes from Spain, a fortified wine from Spain. Port comes from Portugal, and not just anywhere in Portugal. There are certain, regions that these wines belong to. So port can come from only Port of Douro, the region of Portugal. Madeira comes from the island of Madeira, which is off the coast of Portugal. It's actually closer to Africa than it is to Portugal. Quite warm, very warm, as a matter of fact, and wines are excellent. And then Marsala comes from the Sicily, the Sicilian island, one of the most beautiful islands that I've seen of Italy, down south, again, warmer region. So these are the more famous ones. Yes, there are a few other fortified wines as well, apart from that, but we will only mostly talk about sherry and port for now. But the concept remains the same. You have additional alcohol added to them. Why the additional alcohol added to them is here. All right. Why do you add additional alcohol to your sparkling wine? All right. It's not that I got up one day and I said, okay, I have a still wine. Let's add alcohol to it and make it stronger. No. The reason that it was, I'm sorry, I'm facing a little bit of issue. Give me a second. Let me just reshare this. 1 second, guys. Sorry about that. Okay. The reason that a fortified wine came into existence was quite simple, as a matter of fact. If you look at the history of wine and spirits, for that matter, if you go back 200, 250 years, wine was generally being transferred from Europe to the colonies. Okay, and where were these colonies? These colonies were in India, these colonies were in Australia, these colonies were in New Zealand, to the Caribbean, to South Africa, all of these other parts of Africa. So these were the colonies, right? And import-export used to happen back then as well, not just now. The trade used to happen back then as well. So these wines used to be transferred. Of course, back then we did not have planes. We did not have temperature-controlled containers. These wines used to be transported in the ship that looks like that in front of your screen. In big, massive casks, barrels, all right? And of course, these barrels were not temperature controlled. They were waterproof, but they were not oxygen proof, okay? So there were cases wherein these ships used to go all the way from Europe down to South Africa, to the Caribbean, to Australia, which in today's day and age takes about 40 days. All right. So back then, obviously, used to take a lot longer. All right. So ships were the only means of transport. They're slow. They were slow. There was no temperature control at all. It was transported in large, massive wooden vats, which of course, some would leak, some would allow oxygen, some would allow water, and other sort of stuff that's not supposed to go in wine. And it used to go over many latitudes and tropics. So it would start from around, let's say, Spain or France, which is the latitude, I mean, it's not too warm. Then it'll go through the equator, which is really hot, and then go down again, and then go up, and then go down, and then go up. So what would happen is that the wine would go under a lot of stress. Okay, it will go under a lot of stress. It would be very hot, and then very cold, and then very hot, and then very cold, and very hot. By the time these wines used to reach the destination, they used to be, guess what? Not wine, something else, right? And then some smart person thought, listen, you know, guys, we're transporting whiskey, we're transporting cognac, we're transporting brandy, we're transporting a lot of other stuff as well in these casks, but they're not getting bad. So why are the only wines going bad? So they're, okay, you know what? Let's make them stronger. Let's fortify them. Let's see what happens when we put some alcohol in them. And that's how it started, really. They added alcohol and they realized it traveled better. Okay, because alcohol, guess what? What does alcohol do? Alcohol increases the shelf life. All right, it helps preserve, it's a means of preservation, because alcohol doesn't let anything get bad or go bad. If you have a bottle of alcohol and you keep it on a shelf, even if you come back after 10 years, it's still going to be alcohol. It's not going to change. So alcohol doesn't go bad. Alcohol increases the shelf life of anything that's higher in alcohol. So in this case, wine. So they decided to put alcohol in there, increase the alcohol percentage, and increase the shelf life. And then, of course, various regions adapted their own way of making a fortified wine, like sherry, port, Madeira. They have their own different styles, but the concept remains the same. All right, adding alcohol. Cool. That was a little bit of reason why alcohol was added. Now, there are two ways, or not two ways, rather there are two stages at where the alcohol can be added. Okay, you can add the alcohol during the fermentation, okay, which I'll come about in a minute, to make a sweet fortified wine, example port. Or you can add alcohol after fermentation is complete to make a dry fortified wine, like sherry. All right, but this is not a set in stone kind of a thing. There are certain sherries as well where fortification sometimes is done during the fermentation, but let's keep that out for now. So fortification during fermentation here. So what happens basically is the first fermentation is happening. Okay, you've got your grapes, you've crushed the grapes, you've extracted the juice, and then you started the fermentation, right? But if you're making a port or a sweet fortified wine, you let the fermentation go on till about 6% ABV, 5-6% ABV. All right. At that point of time, a little bit of sugar has been converted into alcohol. Not all. Okay, you still have a lot of residual sugar left that is left to be converted into alcohol, but you do not let it. So what you do at this stage, you interrupt the fermentation by adding alcohol in the vat or in the tank that the fermentation is happening. So basically, you increase the alcoholic percentage of the wine over 15%, killing the yeast, because the yeast does not can't stay alive, can't function, can't work if it's over 15% ABV. So you kill the yeast, and if you kill the yeast, guess who can do the fermentation? No one. So fermentation stops, sugar doesn't get converted into alcohol, so you're left with residual sugar, and you've got now a wine which is fortified because you added alcohol in it, but also sweet because you did not let that sugar get converted into alcohol completely. You interrupted the fermentation. All right. Some white wines, still wines, are also made this way, but this separate thing. We'll not talk about that for now. All right. So port is one fortified wine that is made this way. Thus, all ports are sweet. All right. All ports are sweet. The second way of making a fortified wine is fortifying or adding alcohol after the fermentation is complete. For example, most of the sherries are made this way. So basically, you make a dry white wine, simple, and you make completely dry white wine, and then what you do is you add alcohol, and you increase the alcoholic percentage of it beyond 15%. It can be 16, 17, 18, whatever the kind of fortified wine you want to make. There are many types of fortified wine. So within sherry, within port, there are many styles. Okay, it's not just one sherry and there's one style, or one portable is one style. There are many styles within these categories, which are made in different ways. But most of the sherries are made this way. You make a completely dry wine, and then you fortify, add alcohol, and thus increase the ABV of that particular wine. They are now fortified wines. Fortify stronger, make it stronger. Right? Serving temperature would vary from different fortified wines, but most of them are served well chilled as well. There are exceptions in certain vintage ports and certain sweet styles of sherry, but that's for a different day. But remember that most of the fortified wines will be served chilled or well chilled. Around under 10 degrees centigrade would ideally be the serving temperature for most fortified wines. Brands. Lustau is a very, very famous brand. Valdespino, Barbadillo, these are all sherry brands. Taylor's, Graham are your port brands. Blandy's is Madura brand. So the many brands, of course, but of late, tragedy is such that fortified wines are losing their place in the world, and younger generation like yourself are not drinking much fortified wines. They're shifting towards sparkling and rosé and other styles, and this great tradition of fortified wines is slowly starting to vanish, which is one of the things that we should work on, right? So that's your fortified wines in a nutshell. So basically, your wines that are added alcohol can be made, alcohol can be added during the fermentation, all right, to make a sweet fortified wine, or it can be added after the fermentation to make a dry fortified wine, right? Last one is aromatized wine, all right? So aromatized wine, as the name suggests, is aromatized, okay? It has aroma, okay, as the name suggests. Now, these are wines that are almost always going to be fortified first, all right? So aromatized wines are going to be fortified first, wherein you first make your standard still wine, all right? Then you add alcohol to it, and you increase the alcohol percentage of that particular wine. But we're not done yet, all right? After this, what is the most important thing that we do is we add certain botanicals, okay? And we'll talk about what botanicals means in a minute. Basically flavorings, okay? So wines which have been flavored with botanicals and have had additional alcohol added to them are called your aromatized wine. Your examples of certain aromatized wines are vermouth, okay? Very common in bars around the world. A dry vermouth, sweet vermouth, all right? Used a lot in the world. And vermouth, the origin of vermouth is France and Italy, generally southeast France, northwest Italy, Turin area region. And then another one is Lillet, that comes from France, not so well known. So all these aromatized wine have one thing in common, all right? Botanicals, all right? Now, botanicals are compounds or things. Basically, you can say they are flavorings, all right? So flavorings can come in various ways, can come from various places, can come from various origins. One of them is herbs, spices, seeds, fruit peels, berries, spice, you name it, all right? So You can use wormwood, for example. You can use wormwood. For example, you can use orange peel. For example, you can use juniper berries. For example, you can use certain spices. So many different types of botanicals are used in production of aromatized wines. Now, some botanicals are mandatory for production of certain types of aromatized wine, like for vermouth. Wormwood as a botanical is mandatory. All right, you cannot have a vermouth unless you have wormwood as a botanical in that. For Lillet, one of the most important elements and botanicals is quinine. Okay? So these are all bitter botanicals, and generally you will find that's why you, whenever you taste, or when you do so, when you taste an aromatized wine, yes, because it's a wine, it'll be slightly acidic, it'll have a slight sugar, and most of the aromatized wines have added sugar in them. But one of the most common things that most of the aromatized wines will have will be the slight bitterness from the bitter botanicals, like wormwood and like quinine on your screen here, right? So that slight bitterness will be almost always there, right? And many aromatized wines are used in bar operations, okay? Many people and many bartenders, and I'm sure you must have used it as well, use your dry vermouths in different cocktails, use your sweet vermouth in the dry vermouth like martini, sweet vermouth like Manhattan. So all of these, most of these aromatized wines are used in bar operation. But traditionally, aromatized wines were used to be drunk as an aperitifs. All right, that was the tradition. But over a period of time, of course, now that is done not so much. But there are places that you still have it. If you go to certain places in Europe, you'll still find people doing so. Now, most important thing, and something that people are unaware of, and is that why are these aromatized wines used so often in bar operations? The reason that it's used in bar operations is that whenever you're making cocktails, you are looking for a balance. Okay, you're looking for a balance between strong and weak. Strong being your alcohol, weak being your dilution, right? Then you're looking for another balance in your cocktails, which is sweet balanced by sour, or you're looking for another balance, which is sweet balanced by bitter, right? But in the case, and you need to have different elements in a cocktail to have it, because for sweet, you need simple sugar or any juices. For sour, you need citrus juice. All right. For bitters, you generally use your cocktail bitters like Angostura and all. But if you get an element which has all three of them in one, you sort it. All right. That's your aromatized wine. Because an aromatized wine is a wine, it carries acidity. Because an aromatized wine has added sugar in it, it can substitute for sweetness as well in a cocktail. Because your aromatized wine has bitter botanicals, it is slightly bitter. So it is a 3-in-1 kind of a thing. That's why you generally use a lot of it in bars, because it substitutes 2 or 3 elements by just using aromatized wine itself, right? So most of these aromatized wines, for that reason, are used mostly in bars. Okay. Right. So that was your aromatized wine. Now we'll just have a little food and wine quickly before I take your questions. Sparkling wines generally go very well with your foods like caviar, like oysters, like smoked salmon. So mostly white meats, okay, or seafoods, shellfish, seafood, fish. Because of course, sparkling wine is slightly gentle. It's not very strong. It's not very robust. So you need gentle food with it, delicate food with it that pairs well. So caviar, oysters, and it's not limited to this. It's not limited to what's on the screen. There can be a lot of options. Some people like to pair sparkling wine with cake, which I don't recommend, because sparkling wine is high in acidity and cakes are very high in sugar. So they technically don't work together, but around the world we use it. Caviars, oysters, smoked salmon, roast chicken. When we come to the fortified wines, sweet fortified wines, for a moment, we would like port, tawny ports, vintage ports go very well with chocolate-based desert, rich, dark chocolate-based desert, which is very difficult to pair otherwise. All right, pairing chocolate is one of the most difficult things in a culinary in a menu. A wine and chocolate pairing. A wine can go well with certain spirits, but not so much. Less, it's a sweet fortified wine. Fruit pies and blue cheese will go again very well with port or any sweet fortified wine. Blue cheese, because traditionally we have around the world in any part of the world, if you see a cuisine, a lot of our cuisines are balanced in salt and sweet way. Okay, so you've got saltiness of the cheese, blue cheese, and you've got the sugar of the wine. So they go very well. They balance each other out very well. So fruit pies, blue cheese for sweet fortified wines. Then if you talk about dry fortified wines, especially sherry, dry sherries, fino sherries and all, they go very well with fish. They go very well with seafood as well. Iberico ham, tapas, that goes very well with all of these things. Olives, anchovies, these slight, very salty kind of a pungent food that comes from Andalusia and South Spain. Goes very well with that. And then aromatized wines, you will generally find either being used as aperitifs, as start of the meal. They sort of get your gastric juices going, so you feel, you feel like you're hungrier. So they work very well as an aperitif. Or of course, you can use your aromatized wines as your components and elements in the bar. That, as I already discussed, so very, very common in bars. So sparkling wines, sweet fortified wine, dry fortified wines, and your aromatized wine. So all four of them have different components, have different elements, have different aromas, have different flavor characteristics. So they will appeal to different styles of food. Always remember, ladies and gentlemen, it is not the wine that is the problem in food and wine pairing. It is the food that is the problem with food and wine pairing. All right. Wine generally is not the problem. It is the food. Right. It is your palate and your food, how the food tastes on your palate. That is the issue. All right. Cool. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen, for me? Be happy to answer.
Mr. Kunal, if you can stop sharing the screen.
I will, sure.
And students, if you have any questions, you can ask him directly. Maybe I'll start off with one question which a student sent to me. Again, Kunal, this is from a student. They're asking how long can a sherry, an open bottle of sherry, an open bottle of port, and an open bottle of vermouth, how long can it survive in a warm temperature like Malaysia or India?
That's a very good question. As a matter of fact, a fortified wine, a port or a sherry, or an aromatized wine for that matter, if it's kept refrigerated and not outside, it can survive for about a week, week and a half. All right. Again, this has to be refrigerated and shut, not open. Because of course, aromatized wine, fortified wines have slightly higher levels of oxygen. Slightly higher levels of alcohol. So oxygen doesn't attack that quickly compared to where still wines, compared to that, what still wines would get attacked. So a week, week and a half, depending on it being refrigerated and covered, corked at all times.
Any more questions, people? Please don't be shy. Can I ask everybody to switch on your cameras so that it's easy for us to see and it's easy for me to click a group photo. Everybody switch on your cameras. And if you have any questions, please ask our industry speaker. Again, anything from your side? Cindy, Derek, anything? People are very quiet looking at the industry speaker. Shalina, do you have any questions you want to ask? Yes, no, anything? It's a very quiet session. Not a problem. Thank you so much, Kunal. Thanks for talking to all of them and sharing your session with all the students. I think the session could have been much more longer. We could have had, usually, you know, what we do is our practical classes are usually 3 hours long. And in the practical classes, we get to do a lot of sharing sessions. We talk to each other. We do a lot of tastings. We see videos. And that's a much more longer session. But in the theory classes, usually theory classes we do for 1 hour per week only. And they are online. So in theory classes, and usually it's close to dinner time. So most of them look quite hungry and tired and quite shy to switch on their cameras. So sorry about that. People, if you have any questions, please don't be shy to ask questions. Just stop me in between and ask questions.
Any questions? No problems.
Yes, people. Anything from Mr. Kunal? Samuel, any question from your side?
No, sir, all good.
That's fantastic. I hope everybody had a good learning session today. And you learned last week's, the videos which I shared with you, the notes which you have, today's sharing session, all these three things will help you with your wines and spirits, and not spirits so much, more about wines. We will also be doing the sensorials in the week after next week. So in that week, if you have any questions, please bring them to my class or Mr. Anshul's class as well. And we will be very happy to address those questions. If you find a question which you wanted to ask Mr. Kunal today, but you are shy to ask, no worries. Please let me know your question later on in our Teams chat, or you can always send me a message and I will forward it to Mr. Kunal and he can reply those questions to you even later on after today's session.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions, you can ask me anytime, or give your questions, forward your questions to Mr. Mayu. He can give it to me. I'll be happy to answer. Or you can just email me directly if you want. No problems.